Hi, welcome to the Quarantine Cafe. My name is Rafael Moreno. Today's guest is featured on Good Day New York and various other news outlets as a social justice leader for the formerly incarcerated, an active leader for the successful closing of Rikers Island Jail here in New York City. Part of the city-based Human Services and Economic Development Committee. Today we have Davon Woodley, also known as Champ. Champ is a facilitator that helps the formerly incarcerated transition with a plan and resources to help lower recidivism. Champ, welcome to the show. Why are you so passionate about reforming incarcerated men?
Well, first, thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. This is a great opportunity to expose the woes of incarceration. I think for me, it was more so about helping anyone re-enter into society, male, female, non-binary alike. It's very important for people to understand that incarceration is not a fun place to be. I think we all know that as a society, but what people fail to understand is that just because you serve time in the Department of Corrections, they think that you come home corrected or they correct you. No, you correct yourself. For those who make great changes during their time, serving their time, I want them to come home with equitable resources and access to the proper help and care that they need to transition into society successfully. I know that for me, after serving a 4-year sentence, it was very difficult for me to transition to get the certain type of jobs that I wanted, or even get equitable resources that fit my greatest and most immediate need. And I feel as though everyone coming home, especially in an epidemic such as this, definitely needs to be catered to. Definitely needs to be catered to whatever help and resources they can get the quickest access to immediately.
So Champ, you mentioned that you yourself have been incarcerated. At what age did you go in?
At the age of 23, came home when I was 26, right after my birthday, my 26th birthday. Served 2 years, 10 months, 25 days in upstate New York in Marcy Correctional Facility. Prior to, I spent 48 days in downstate correctional facility where I was on 23-hour lockdown. Only time I really came out was to shower, eat, and possible work, if that was possible. It was a very hard transition, you know, being someone of privilege, you know, of a decent background, and having to transition to being treated as a full-blown criminal, and knowing that I was serving I was serving a 4-year sentence, and thank God I was able to give some of that time back through a program that I was a part of, facilitating people who are coming into the facility and transitioning out of the facility, which is probably why I love doing what I do today and facilitating classes now. I was able to get back 6 months and come home 6 months early. So that was actually a blessing in my life.
Now, for most of us, we won't know what the process is of being incarcerated. And I'm pretty sure that you being there all that time, you have lots of stories to tell. But can you please walk us through the process of your experience really throughout that extended time?
Yeah, the experiences. So at first, I want to address mental health is very much so needed without the consequence of having to be diagnosed as clinically depressed, or you seeking help automatically puts you on medications. I feel as though incarceration kind of criminalizes those with who just need to talk to somebody. For me, I know that my transition wasn't easy. As I mentioned before, I was doing pretty well for myself at the age of 23. And I was working 2 jobs. I was going to school full time. I was taking care of my daughter. And I was in a fruitful relationship with someone I was with who helped me throughout my entire incarceration, and I'm very grateful for. Um, so I was very well off and very well supported, unlike most people that I know. I know that when I went into Manhattan Tombs, which is located downtown Manhattan near Chinatown, I was scared. They placed me in a high risk facility in a unit, and I was terrified for my life. I didn't even want to come out. Um, so I struggled with that and wanted to talk to somebody about my own safety. It was even hard because I didn't want to be jeopardized or labeled as somebody who would quote unquote be called 730. That's somebody who receives mental health medication at that time. I know that when I got transitioned from Manhattan Tombs to Rikers Island, it became 10 times worse. I was housed in the sixth building for almost 40 days, 38, 40 days. And throughout that time, I was still stuck in the same court clothes that I was sentenced in for all that entire time. So I had to constantly rewash a shirt, slacks, wear state shoes. You know, they're also known as patakis. You know, um, ironically enough, um, and I had to deal with the hardship of sharing a space with 60 men that I did not know or what they were convicted of. It was very terrifying because I had no friends or family in sight to help me besides a phone call I can make every day or so. So that transition was hard. Um, as I got transferred upstate to downstate correctional facility, uh, that was probably the toughest moment because I went from being surrounded by so many people. And even in that moment of dealing with several different strangers, I felt a sense of community around it because, like, I wasn't alone or as alone as I was in downstate. In downstate correctional, throughout my duration there, I was under 23-hour lockdown. You know, we ate three times a day, and the last meal was at 6 o'clock. So I pretty much went without until the next morning, which was about 7 a.m. So we're talking about a whole 13 hours going without food. You know, my only resource is breath. So, you know, I lost a considerable amount of weight. You know, my only access to the outside world was through letters. Fortunately enough, the facility allowed us to mail letters home for free. We had unlimited pencils and paper, so that worked in our favor. That really did, in my favor, at least. I reached out to as many people as possible, and they sent back so many encouraging words in return, which I truly do appreciate. Um, After that, being transitioned to Marcy Correctional Facility, where I stayed for the remainder of my sentence, um, was unique. You know, I was housed in yet another dorm. The dorm setting was very, like trying to make it seem like a home setting, but we already knew it wasn't. I mean, you wake up, you see staterooms, you see an officer in your face. It's nowhere you really want to be. I remember telling people, they were asking me over the phone after, set up my account and everything, what's it like in here? What's going on? Good. People are like, yeah, I made myself dinner. Want to watch the latest movie out on our flat screen TV. Some of them looked at it as, oh, you're living good in there. I'm like, I'm not because I'm not there talking to you. You know, I was in a medium facility. Granted, I still seen people get cut, stabbed, people lose their own lives, take their own lives. And it's one of those things that really get to you when you're not used to seeing that so abruptly. And my only solitude, my only form of solace was, growing a closer relationship to God. Um, I really have to thank a lot of people in my immediate circle for helping me with that. And I met a lot of great men in the facility I was in who catered, who poured into me spiritually. And I became a facilitator. Well, I became a pallbearer for the chaplain, the chaplaincy. So that was one of my jobs, which was great. I got very into my faith, very into theology, the understanding of how to build and grow into that spiritual realm. Um, and then my other job, which I loved to death, was working orientation and phase three. Orientation is when I had the opportunity to take a class and formal training to become a facilitator. And this facilitator position, if I worked it without getting into no trouble for 2 straight years, I get 6 months off my sentence. So at first, that was the first goal in mind, was to make sure that I come home 6 months early to see my daughter. At the time, 6 months early to see my lady, my moms, everybody I love and care about, because 6 months sooner beats being in there 6 months later, any day of the week. Um, after I took that class, I became a facilitator for orientation. Orientation was amazing. I got a chance to really help people with coping skills, with adjusting to incarceration, like what to avoid, what you should be focusing your mind on, who can you reach out to if you need help. Um, at the time, uh, Vice President Joe Biden enacted a federal law called PREA. PREA is a Prison Rape Elimination Act, and it was allowing people who are incarcerated the opportunity to get training and counseling people suffering from sexual assault. So I got a chance to meet with people who feared, being sexually assaulted or who have been sexually assaulted, and counseling them through their traumas. Um, I even done mediations and crisis interventions for people suffering from uh, PTSD, uh, whether they've seen or witnessed or experienced a traumatic event of their own. One of the ones that I loved doing was grief counseling, helping people who felt helpless and useless when a loved one passes away, and let's say they can't see them at a funeral because it's out of state. Those are some of the things that I enjoy doing, is really helping them cope with incarceration, because by talking to them, I was also helping myself. Um, and then lastly was becoming a facilitator for ART, uh, which is pretty much acronym for saying anger management, you know, learning and understanding how our emotions dictated our present state. A lot of us made emotional decisions that had long lasting effects. I know for me, I enacted out of anger, rage, and frustration. And I've tried to cater to those emotions by finding solution based theories that work best for me, and helping those with whatever emotions they were feeling by taking the necessary steps to learn the 3 A's. The 3 A's are action. I mean, the 3 A's are acknowledgement, taking a knowledge. No, 3 A's, repeat that. The 3 A's are awareness. Awareness is how is this making you feel right now, currently? What is showing up in you? Acknowledgement is, are you able to do anything about it right now? Right? And then action. What are some actionable steps you can take to work through it with yourself or with someone? How can you gain support from this? And all of these are really important to know, and sometimes it take a little bit more time. So I love teaching that class. And then lastly, phase three. Phase three is when you're about to walk out the door. You have 90 days or less before you transition back into society. So helping people with resumes, helping people with resources to drug rehabilitation centers, AA, NA, helping them find shelter, writing letters to family, asking for support if they can stay there. looking at possible job prospects, what temp agencies are in the streets right now, writing letters to organizations, helping them figure out the best resources for them that they may need. And I think with that being said, um, I did that and up until the last the last day I was incarcerated, and along with them, I was in phase three, teaching phase three. So I wanted them to know that this journey doesn't stop. You are making a plan to walk out of this door, and it has to be concrete. And then also dealing with rejection, also dealing with the punitive authority that follows you once you walk out of those doors. I've spoken to several people who had parole violations, and they hated the fact that, parole would knock on their door at midnight. How do you prepare for something like that? How do you prepare to know that you have to be home at 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night? And teaching them that, or talking to them that about that has helped me in my transition, even though it was still frustrating within itself. Um, and I think lastly, coming home for me was extremely gratifying because once I walked out of those gates, I took one last look and said, I'll never be back here. I got off the bus, Times Square, and I was back to the hustle and bustle. Um, it was actually pretty amazing because I didn't realize until that time when I got to Times Square that I haven't been on an elevator, an escalator, or walked up a flight of stairs in God knows how long. And I started laughing at myself because it felt foreign to me. And then having those moments of humanity and realizing that there are some habits that you have to shake in that moment or in those moments to follow is very, very, very important. Um, I think lastly, reporting to parole is very interesting. As you know, I'm a criminal justice, social justice advocate, and them seeing me on TV or in the newspaper, you know, it kind of disturbed them because they had never seen somebody like myself fight for my rights the way that I had, speak on panels the way that I do, and advocate for change the way that I am. And a lot of them saw that as a problem. And a lot of them saw that as this is what you are destined to do. Um, I've received some problems around that. But at the same time, I've also received a lot of praise from my own community. And the level of work that I do is very, 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 very much so gratifying.
Got it. Thank you for sharing all of that. So, and you being with your experience, coming out of it, instead of hiding in the shadows or just going about your life like regular, you decided to really be the change. Now, my
Yeah,
question to you is, what would be the biggest change that you would want to implement?
I'm actually taking a turn from what I was previously doing, which is closing Rikers, which thankfully is going to close in 2026. We got the borough-based jail plan in action. Obviously, it's probably on hold due to this epidemic, but we still have people who are incarcerated on Rikers Island, both detainees, people who have been convicted on a new charge, or even people serving time on a parole violation. They need to be released. Um, I've done work around close Rikers. I've done work around ending um, mass bail, ending bail, period. I'm all for bail reform. And then lastly, my next journey, my new mission is to end parole. Um, when I say end parole, it doesn't mean that there won't be any. I want it to be more of a uh, have a have more of a human service approach as opposed to a punitive approach, and that's something that's really important to me. I'm doing a lot of work around figuring out how we can make this more of a social service kind of thing, as opposed to making it something that is more abrasive and so forceful and forced upon you. There are people who are serving violations right now on Rikers Island for violating curfew. You know, someone showed up an hour late from their curfew, now has contracted coronavirus. You know, they're more at risk than somebody who are who just got sentenced to serve however many determined amount of years or months of state, who knows, right? And to me, that is very disheartening to know that they can be released, and it's been a struggle to get them out. I'm thankful that last week and the week before we've been able to release a couple of thousand, which is great. But you also have people who are that continue to expose themselves, such as correctional officers, who's bringing that in and out the house, of their home. Anybody who works on the island as faculty in the facility, um, are exposing themselves to the same thing and continue to have that form of exposure. And it's disheartening to know that they're um, doing slave labor right now, where people who are dying from COVID-19 on Rikers Island are the same ones, same people who are incarcerated with them are burying them on Hart's Island. You know, um, that's extremely traumatic, especially if you're somebody who was arrested for something simple as a misdemeanor, haven't seen a judge, haven't been charged yet officially, and just awaiting a bail hearing, or awaiting to see a judge of any kind for any apparent reason. Um, to be exposed to this epidemic in such a confined space is terrifying. So yeah, I just wanted to bring light to that, but mainly parole reform. I really want parole to end and be something of a holistic experience for anybody coming home, to help the individual returning into society, with their most immediate needs, making that a priority over stipulations.
And I'm going to be the devil's advocate. Why? I mean, you could look at it as, somebody did something wrong and now they're being treated a certain way within the system, but that's something that's imposed on them due to choice, right? So what is it about that reformation that you want to humanize more?
And because we are all human, you are not your crime. You are not your past doesn't define who you are today. In some cases it does, but in my experience, I definitely did not come home the same person. Um, I have definitely witnessed things that cater to me being as strong as I am, me being as passionate as I am about, sharing my story and my voice. Prior to this, I didn't have one. I lived a very recluse lifestyle. I was very much so one of those children who was raised as be seen, not heard, you know, do as I say, not as I do. Um, Men don't cry, suck it up. I was really raised that way, not to fully express myself. And now that I am have a platform, have a stage to really bring these things to light, I want people, anybody who's coming home from incarceration, to know that they have the ability to share their voice. You have a chance to be heard. You have the right to be heard. You know, if you are coming home from incarceration and your stipulations are you gotta live here, be home at a certain time, um, you can't do these certain things. You have to take that certain program. Well, I have two kids I'm trying to get out of back in custody with. I want to work a full time job so I can maintain them. And, maybe that job caters to you having to work longer hours. Sometimes that's not possible because they're more concerned about you fall under the guidelines of stipulations rather than helping you meet your most immediate needs. Um, it's very important to make that happen for anybody who wants to make change. Sometimes there are people who get caught on the same block that they grew up on and have to return to that very same building once they come home from incarceration? Why put them back in the same situation that took them away from their loved ones in the first place? Why not allow them the opportunity to relocate themselves? In AA and NA, they say people, places, and things cater to you relapsing, and you're putting them back into those negative nouns, as I call them. The negative nouns will seriously cause you to be a part of the recidivism rate, and I don't want anybody, no matter how many times you've been arrested or incarcerated, to go back inside for any apparent reason. So if we help them with their most immediate needs first, and give them equitable resources, it's going to give them the opportunity to succeed and never go back inside.
The system is such a tight box that it doesn't really allow for the individual growth, and it'll put them back in a situation that's not conducive to them really coming back into society in a proper way.
And course, I know that for me, it was a struggle to do certain things that I wanted to do. Um, I still remember when I had a chance to speak in DC alongside some leaders from Georgetown who was talking about bail reform and ending, mass bail. I know that it was a struggle for me to even go to speak, and I had to speak to the SVO, the senior parole officer, and their supervisors, and all of that stuff. And in the midst of me like explaining myself, I had to stop and ask a question. I said, I don't understand why I have to explain or ask you guys to fight for my own freedoms. And they had to take a pause on that. They didn't never heard somebody explain a question like that before or ask a question like that before. Going to DC to fight for something that is causing huge problems in your job, your field, and that's people being rearrested or people catering to the recidivism rate or getting violated. I'm trying to create change and ultimately help make your jobs easier. I don't understand why I have to fight for my own freedoms on this one. They granted me
Got
the
it.
opportunity to go to DC, which was great. I had a chance to speak, which was awesome. And amongst panels of people with, the whole alphabet after their name, all these extra letters. And it felt great to know that I could stand shoulder to shoulder with people who actually want to help cater to this change.
So you mentioned earlier that there's a negative stigma against mental health needs. How does that show up?
Shows up in various ways. As you know, we're a part of a group called All Kings that is like a men's holistic circling. Started out of Folsom Prison in California, but mainly it's something that's been practiced throughout the entire world. Um, there's not any of that in New York State. There's no room for you to really express yourself, to really dig deep into what's bothering you. You know, I still remember one day where I was frustrated at the fact that I lost a loved one while I was incarcerated. In the midst of my prayer, I broke down and cried. And I was in the chaplain's office at church, and I was by myself. I was just praying, and I screamed very loudly, crying. I guess I see y'all heard it. About four of them ran in there with their clubs out, and they see me in tears. They're like, "What are you doing?" I was telling them, I was trying to explain, trying to gather myself and really explain to them what happened. And they looked at me like I was going to hurt myself, or they wanted to treat me as if I was going to hurt someone else, or if I already did, because they started searching to see if there was something they could find. But in that moment, I just wish that somebody would have just heard me and understood where I was coming from without fear of persecution, without somebody being afraid of me, thinking that I'm going to harm myself or harm others, when actually I just wanted to talk about it. You know, uh, Thankfully, the chaplain came out, stopped it, quiet the whole situation, And I went into his office and I had the chance to receive counsel from somebody I trust. Um, if only it was that easy um, to receive that at any point in time during incarceration for somebody who was dealing with um, mental health instabilities of any kind. It would be amazing to see the type of change that would come home from various individuals. It would be great.
So, Champ, as a last word, what would you like to impart on our audience?
Thank you for asking. Last and parting words are just two things. One, for those who have loved ones that they check in with on a regular basis, the same way we do in the streets, reach out to a loved one who is incarcerated right now. It's really important that they get the love and support that they need right now. A lot of them aren't able to have access to the things we are afforded to every single day. That is commissary, which is a lack of right now. That is access to rec, going outside, working out. A lot of them are locked in their cell, so they're not even able to get adequate meals. So they get bagged lunches and dinners, breakfasts, um, and send them a letter, send them a card, send them some food, send them something to show that there's hope for them. Send them something to hold them over, to help them out. I have a friend who was incarcerated. I sent him some books, I sent him a letter, and I sent him some snacks. I didn't want to just do that because I felt bad. I did that because I cared. I know that if I've never experienced something like that in my life, and I was incarcerated with him, so I can only imagine what it's like right now. And then secondly, for those who are self quarantining, out coming home from incarceration, check on them as well. There are people there who are just coming home with $40 in the bus ticket. And that's all they have. And us as a society know that's not enough to buy a roll of toilet paper or some paper towels or even a bottle of Clorox. So anything you can do to help them, whether it's buying some supplies, sharing what you have, and letting them know that you're here to help is very important because their transition is in jeopardy right now. It really is.
Brother, thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for your insight. And let me see. Do you have anything coming up right now?
Uh, Unfortunately, everything got canceled. You know, I am working on some branding content. I do want to get into speaking more online, so look out for that. And yeah, just trying to connect with amazing brothers such as yourself and just learn how to build from there.
So once again, man, thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for your insight. And if you would like to get in contact with Champ, all of his contact information and his bio, as well as everything else that you would want to know about him, is going to be in the description below. So check it out, keep in contact. And once again, brother, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.